Chapter 101, Rinaldo's Povey. I stood looking at the map covering the large table in front of me in the Vargas estate's war room. Uncertainty cluttered my mind. The prophecy, Malik Blackthorn's rogue wolves, and the Underworld Council's sinister influence all weighed heavily on me. It was no longer just wolves and swords in this fight. It had to do with magic, deceit, and the dissolution of coalitions that might destroy us. The space seemed too small and claustrophobic. I needed to stop the council in any way I could. However, I felt farther away from a solution the closer I came to one. Then there was Valeria. Once a source of strength, our relationship felt strained now, entangled in secrets that neither of us could manage. Although I had always trusted my gut, I wasn't sure what to do this time. Felipe, my advisor, interrupted me and drew my focus back to the map with the words, "Reinaldo. We must move swiftly. The influence of the Underworld Council is growing. We must not allow them to rule us." I nodded, attempting to concentrate. "I understand. I am aware of what we must do. However, we require more than just a plan. We require allies. We must have the fortitude to defend ourselves." Felipe grinned tightly as he pointed to our borders on the map with his fingers. "We'll figure something out. But Rinaldo, we need you to be focused. Distractions are not something we can afford." I didn't answer. The truth was something I didn't want to hear. It was impossible to ignore the distractions. Valeria, the prophecy, and now the fear that we were being drawn into something from which we could not break free. Javier, the leader of our magical division, entered the war room as the door creaked open. His movements were cautious, and his face was pale. I considered him to be one of my closest allies and had always trusted him. However, he felt uneasy about something in his eyes today. He appeared apprehensive. "Javier," I said in a measured tone, "we're talking about what to do next. What's new in your division?" Javier shifted uneasily on his feet and paused before speaking. "Rinaldo, a lot is going on. Now more than ever, magic is erratic. The power of the Underworld Council is encroaching on our territory more quickly than anticipated." As though uncertain whether to proceed, he stopped himself. I scowled as I observed him. "What's happening, Javier? You've changed." He looked away from me. "I've been under pressure. I haven't disclosed certain things." My stomach churned. "What do you mean?" Javier inhaled deeply while speaking, his hands trembling a little. "I have been collaborating with the Council of the Underworld. Rinaldo, they threatened to kill me. There was nothing I could do. The words struck me like a blow to the body. I was having trouble breathing. Deep and agonizing betrayal that went right to the heart of my beliefs." "Javier, the man I had regarded as a brother?" I stepped forward and spoke in a chilly tone. "Have you been collaborating with them all this time?" "I had no choice," he said again in a beseeching tone. "Rinaldo, they offered me power, strength to defend Valeria and the pack. I believed I was acting in the best possible way." With my hands clenched at my sides, I advanced another step. "You believed you were acting in the best way? By letting me down? By collaborating with those who seek to bring us down?" "I didn't want to." Javier reached out to me, his hands shaking as his voice broke. "I apologize, Rinaldo. This is not what I ever wanted. However, they left me with no options. Everything I hold dear was in danger. I had to take action." His words had weight, but I was too angry to handle them coolly. "You violated everything I trusted you to defend, and everything we stood for. And you're telling me now that you've been collaborating with those who want to destroy our world?" With a guilty expression on his face, Javier took a step back. "I didn't wish to. I believed that by playing them, I could prevent them from destroying us. I was attempting to keep you, Valeria, the pack safe. But now I see the price. I can see the harm I've caused." I shook my head, feeling angry and incredulous. "You believe that by playing their game, you can keep us safe? By providing them with information?" Javier apologized once more, his voice cracking. "However, I've taken the necessary actions to ensure my survival. And now, Rinaldo, I need your assistance. I am unable to return. However, I can assist us in escaping this situation." I was overcome with emotion, but at the core of it all was one idea: treachery. Javier had betrayed us all, including me. The fact that he wasn't lying was the most difficult aspect. His eyes showed it to me. Like the rest of us, he was trapped. "What prevented you from approaching me earlier?" With a sharp, hurt voice, I asked, "What kept you from telling me? Together we could have fought. This could have been avoided." Javier muttered, "I didn't want to lose you, Ronaldo. I was afraid of losing the pack. I reasoned that I could fix it if I could just wait long enough. However, I realize now that I was mistaken. I couldn't bear to look at him, so I turned away. The weight of his confession was causing my head to spin. Now what? How was I to handle this? I said in a steady but hurt voice, "Javier, you have betrayed our trust. I'm not sure if I can pardon you for this." Javier's voice was hardly audible as he said, "I understand. But allow me to put things right, Ronaldo. Allow me to assist you. The council has never been closer. We are running out of time." I was conflicted. His statements made sense, but I no longer had faith in his loyalty or trustworthiness. How could I have faith in someone who had been collaborating with our adversaries and providing them with all the resources they required to annihilate us? I ran a hand through my hair and muttered, "I don't know. I'm not sure what to do." A loud crash reverberated through the war room before Javier could say another word. The door flew open, and the other leaders of the Vargas pack rushed in. I could see the questions written all over their faces, and their eyes were full of suspicion. "What's happening here?" One of our most reliable leaders, Felipe, made a demand. Shouting was heard. "What is going on?" I turned to face Javier, who stood motionless, regret shining in his eyes. It was this. The truth was out. What would I do now, though, was still a question. I turned to the pack and began, but my voice trailed off. "Javier has been collaborating with the Underworld Council." The room erupted in deafening gasps. All eyes turned to Javier, their anger and suspicion evident. "What?" Felipe lost his temper. "Are you serious?" With a trembling voice, Javier apologized. "I didn't wish to. However, they left me with no options." The pack leaders moved forward, mistrust in their eyes. The weight of what had just been disclosed filled the room with tension. The air was oppressive. "Reinaldo, what should we do now?" Felipe inquired in a low, menacing voice. I turned to face Javier, who was on his knees with his head lowered in embarrassment. I wasn't sure if I could forgive him. I was unsure if I could ever trust him again. However, it was obvious that this choice would alter everything. What I did next would determine both the pack's and my future. A chilly howl reverberated throughout the room as the door slammed open once more. My heart stopped beating. The outlaw wolves, they were present. Now what would happen to us? How would the pack respond to this last test? I had no idea. I was going to find out, though. Chapter 102, Valeria's Pove. As the first rays of dawn appeared over the mountains, I stood in the garden, the cool night air stinging my skin, my gaze focused on the far horizon. Everything was moving too quickly inside of me, even though the outside world seemed to be frozen, suspended in time. I felt as though the prophecy was choking me with its weight on my chest. It all seemed too much. The dark secrets, the betrayals, and the curse I now knew. Never before had I felt so lost and out of control. However, there was no time to think about it. I anticipated what would happen. The Underworld Council was drawing near. Their hold on our lives and packs had already become more secure. I sensed their dark magic in the promises they made to me. Strength, command, protection for my pack. It was alluring. However, I knew better than to put my trust in them. The council offered manipulation instead of loyalty, and they would sacrifice anyone to achieve their goals. I couldn't allow them to prevail. Not right now. Not after everything for which we had already fought. Unexpectedly, the messenger entered the estate like a shadow through the gates. The air felt heavy with the dark energy of his presence alone. I could tell by the way he carried himself that he was from the Underworld Council, as if he was aware that he had the ability to shatter anyone he spoke to. Long shadows were cast between us by the moonlight when I met him in the garden. His eyes were calculating and cold. His voice was smooth, like velvet over steel as he greeted me. "Valeria Montoya, you have a message from the council." I stared without replying. He displayed a scroll that was sealed with the emblem of the council. I slowly unrolled it after taking it from him. As I read the words, my heart skipped a beat. It was a straightforward ultimatum. Accompany them. Assist them in transforming the world of the supernatural. Give them complete control. Alternatively, I could refuse and see everything I valued destroyed. I had always known that I would have to make this decision, but I had hoped it wouldn't come so quickly. The messenger moved closer and remarked, "You know the power they offer. End of war, safety for your people, and control over everything. Loyalty is all that is required." I tried to ignore the pull of his words as I looked him in the eyes. Despite the temptation, I resisted it. I knew the council would never provide genuine loyalty because I had witnessed enough of their methods. They were prepared to sacrifice anyone, including me, in order to gain power. I clenched my teeth, the decision's weight bearing down on me. I said in a steady voice, "I refuse. I refuse to accompany you." Something, perhaps disappointment, flitted in the messenger's eyes. Or was it rage? It made no difference. I had decided. He said, his tone shifting to one of menace. "You don't understand the consequences. You believe that ignoring us will keep you safe. It will ruin you. You will observe the extent to which the council will go in order to achieve their goals." I said sharply, "I know exactly what you're capable of, and I'm prepared to accept it. My pack, my family, they are worth more than the power you offer." For a moment there was silence between us, heavy and thick. Like the quiet before a storm, the air felt charged. Then the earth shook under my feet. The initial tremor was slight and hardly perceptible. However, it grew stronger and faster. I stared up at the sky, my heart pounding. The sun was not visible because of the dark clouds that had gathered and were swirling overhead. The council had no intention of wasting any more time. They were acting independently. The messenger said in a chilly tone, "You ought to have agreed. However, it's too late. You will discover the consequences of disobeying us." Once more, I felt the earth trembling beneath my bones. The very ground was rebelling against my defiance. With my heart racing, I took a step back. What was going on? Abruptly, a shadow darker than the night itself appeared in front of me. It was an ancient, dreadful creature from the depths of the underworld. I sensed the force emanating from it, the unadulterated magic that felt like it was choking me. "Valeria Montoya," the being said, its voice deep and resonating in my bones. "You have chosen to reject us, but I offer you one last chance. Submit. Join us, and your suffering will end." I stood there, my fists clenched at my sides, my body trembling with the force of the dark magic surrounding me. I could feel it pulling at me, testing my resolve, but I would not bend. "I will not submit," I said, my voice louder now, stronger. "I will never submit to you." The figure's smile, if it could be called that, was full of malice. "You have made your choice," it said, the words dripping with dark satisfaction. "But the cost of your defiance will be great. You will see how far we will go to break you." And with that, the figure vanished, leaving the air heavy with dark energy. The storm above raged harder, the winds howling like a beast unleashed. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I didn't let fear take over. I had made my choice, and now I would fight. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The council's wrath had only begun, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. As the wind howled around me, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned to see Reinaldo standing there, his face a mask of concern. He had witnessed the whole exchange, the power, the threat. "What did you find, Valeria?" he asked, his voice low and filled with suspicion. I stood there, my heart still racing, knowing that everything was about to change. "I made my choice," I said, my voice firm despite the fear gnawing at me. "And I won't back down." Reinaldo stepped forward, his gaze intense. "What did they offer you?" I looked into his eyes, my resolve hardening. "Power, control, everything we want, but at the cost of our souls." I refused. He didn't say anything at first. I could see the weight of my words sinking in. "Then we fight," he said, his voice filled with determination, "together." But as I stood there, with Reinaldo by my side, I couldn't shake the feeling that the council's wrath was already too close. Their magic was already deep within us, and the cost of defying them, it might just destroy everything we had. What would happen next? What would the council do to us? And would our defiance be the end of us all? The storm raged above, and the darkness closed in. The final battle had begun. Chapter 103, Emiliano's Povey. As I strolled around the boundaries of the Montoya estate, the night air felt oppressive. I could almost hear the rogue wolves approaching, their twisted forms lurking just out of sight as the darkness closed in around me. I couldn't stop thinking about the revelation I had made about my family's history, a deal with the Underworld Council that had enslaved us all to their sinister magic. The weight of what I was learning now was far greater than the betrayal I had endured at Mateo's hands. Santiago, my father, had kept a lot of things from me. It was all too much, the lies, the agreements with the very people who wanted to bring us down. And I felt conflicted in the midst of everything. I was torn between wanting to keep my brother and Valeria safe and feeling loyal to my pack. The weight of what lay ahead seemed insurmountable. The eerie echo of a wolf's distant call mingled with my racing thoughts. Like an invisible hand tightening its hold on everything I valued, I could feel the council's power expanding. I had to make a decision that would affect my pack, my family, and everyone I cared about. With the war room door looming in front of me, I slowed my pace. I knew that everything would change when Santiago called me. I steadied myself with a deep breath and then pushed the door open. Santiago was waiting for me inside, his eyes unreadable and icy. There were a lot of unspoken truths in the air. He didn't say hello or give me any comforting words. He gestured for me to sit instead. "The Underworld Council have made their demands," he said quietly but firmly. "Emiliano, their loyalty has come at a far higher cost than we had anticipated." I went cold. "What do you mean?" With my heart racing, I asked in a low voice. Santiago never took his eyes off of mine. "The agreement we reached wasn't merely a power grab. The Council is looking for more. They're looking for a sacrifice, a life. To maintain their control over the supernatural realm, one of us has to perish." The blood drained from my face. Fear and incredulity made my stomach turn. "You mean they want one of us to perish?" "Yes," Santiago replied in a remorseful tone. "And that is the price we must pay to ensure our survival, the continuation of this pack and the Montoya heritage." My thoughts were racing. The words were so difficult for me to comprehend. A life. There had to be a fatality. The cost would be borne by my own blood, my family. It was like a crushing boulder pressing down on me. "Who?" I uttered a barely audible whisper. After a moment of hesitation, Santiago said the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "It could be you, or Valeria, or even Reinaldo." It felt like the world was tilting on its axis. Anger, fear, and betrayal made my chest tighten. "You can't be serious," I spat as I got to my feet, my voice rising as the storm inside of me intensified. "You're prepared to give up one of us in order to maintain your position in this world, only to ensure the survival of the pack?" "I'm taking care of what needs to be done, Emiliano," Santiago stated in a stern and icy tone. "This is the only way. Even though you might not understand right now, this is the price we pay to live, and I refuse to allow anyone to take that away from us." I clenched my fists at my sides and said, "You're wrong. There must be an alternative. This cannot be the sole choice. This agreement is not binding on you. We can combat it. We are able to shatter it." For the first time, I could see the full depth of Santiago's inner darkness as his eyes hardened. "You're not getting it. We cannot even begin to comprehend the extent of the Council's power. We have no other option." "No," I shot back, my rage growing. "It's you who doesn't comprehend. This power and this agreement have blinded you. We cannot continue to live this way. We cannot continue to negotiate with monsters in order to live." The air between us seemed to be thickening with a dark, oppressive energy, and Santiago's expression grew even more stern. "Emiliano, you're making a mistake. I'm acting in this family's best interests, for everyone." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had to think, but my anger was rising again. There must have been another route. I couldn't allow my dad to make any sacrifices. Valeria, no, not Reinaldo, and certainly not me. I said in a firm but determined voice, "I won't let you do this. I'll look for another route. I'll betray the agreement. I'll protect this family and ensure that the Council doesn't get their way." In exasperation, Santiago's jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed. "Emiliano, you could try. But keep in mind that every decision you make will have a cost. It will also be much steeper than you anticipate." I didn't answer. His words hung in the air behind me as I turned and headed for the door. I heard Santiago's ominous voice calling out from behind me as I reached for the handle. "Emiliano, you cannot avoid what has been done. The past cannot be altered. The chilly estate air pressed in around me as I walked out of the war room without turning around. The weight of everything I had just learnt was weighing heavily on my heart, and my mind was racing. However, I was certain that I would not allow my family's troubled past to define us. I'd find another way. I heard a wolf's piercing howl as I ventured out into the night. The sound echoed through the air like a prophecy, and I froze. My feet started to tremble on the ground. The rogue wolves roar. They were on their way. With my heart pounding in my chest, I hurried to where the noise was coming from, and I saw them, more rogue wolves, their eyes glimmering with dark magic, as I came to the edge of the estate. However, they weren't by themselves. Something bigger, something more hideous, a shadow-clad figure, a creature under the Underworld Council's control, stood in the middle of them. Here was the council. They weren't only after me either. They had us all in their sights. I didn't have time to waste. What I did next would determine the fate of the pack and my family. It was my responsibility to avert the council's wrath, which had already arrived. Now what would I do? Could I prevent them before it was too late? Or would I have to watch as everything I held dear burnt? Chapter 104, Valeria's Pove. The early morning silence enveloped me like a thick shroud as I made my way through the Vargas estate's lengthy hallways. The halls were barely illuminated by the gentle light of the rising sun, which gave everything a pale glow. But I wasn't thinking about the morning's beauty. The prophecy that plagued me, the mysteries of my family's past, and the widening gap between Reinaldo and me were the dark thoughts that burdened me. I felt like I was approaching a storm for which I wasn't sure I was prepared, and each step felt heavier than the one before it. Reinaldo and I were getting farther apart every day, and the decisions we both had to make were getting more difficult. I knew in my heart that everything was going to change as the Underworld Council's hold on our world grew stronger. But before we could stop it, how much of our world would we lose? I found Reinaldo in the war room, waiting for me. I was aware that we would eventually need to talk. We could no longer afford to ignore the council's threat. We needed to do something, and we needed to do it quickly. Reinaldo turned to face me as I walked into the room. I could see the fatigue in his eyes, but his face was fixed in that familiar look of resolve. He, too, was feeling the weight of what was to come. "Valeria," he greeted me softly, his voice tinged with concern. "We must speak." I moved across from him and nodded. "I know," I said quietly. "The council is drawing nearer. We cannot continue to act as though this is not taking place." Leaning forward, Reinaldo's eyes were fixed. "We must join forces with the other packs. We will be overburdened if we don't. Already the council's influence is growing rapidly." A knot twisted in my stomach. I wanted to think that we would be stronger if we formed an alliance with the other packs, but the more I considered it, the more I realized that it would only make the council's hold on us stronger. And what happens if the packs are taken over by the council? My question was hardly audible above a whisper. What happens when they have all of us under their thumb? Ronaldo's eyes flickered with doubt, but he kept his resolve. When the time comes, we'll take care of that. We have to live now. We must band together. I had the unshakable impression that we were about to fall into a trap. I had a gut feeling that the council had already foreseen this, and that their strategy was much more intricate than we had thought. "Reinaldo," I said, my voice heavy with my anxieties, "I'm not sure this is the right path. We fall deeper into their hands every time we move." Reinaldo put his hand on mine as he reached across the table. Although the contact was momentarily consoling, my chest's uneasiness persisted. He said quietly, "I know it's hard. However, I don't see any other option. We cannot afford to be split apart." I pulled my hand away slowly, the coldness of the room suddenly overwhelming. I wanted to trust him, wanted to believe that this was the right choice. However, my entire being was screaming that it wasn't. With my voice trembling, I admitted, "I'm not sure if I can pull this off. I feel like I'm becoming less of myself the more I learn. The distinction between what is necessary and what is right is no longer clear to me." Though I could see the conflict in his eyes, Ronaldo's face softened with understanding. "We'll work it out together. You don't have to bear this burden by yourself." However, I already had the impression that I was burdened by everything. I couldn't shake the feeling that we would lose something or someone important no matter what we decided. Then, as I opened my mouth to speak again, an odd thing occurred. A sudden, overwhelming flood of images struck me. My surroundings appeared to vanish, and I was left with a chilly vision of the future. I saw myself standing between my family and Reinaldo. I had to make a decision, and it seemed like I would lose everything whichever way I went. I couldn't see how my devotion to my family and my love for Reinaldo could be reconciled because they were in direct conflict. The heaviness it left behind was intolerable, but the vision vanished as swiftly as it had appeared. My heart ached as I gazed at Reinaldo. Since it seemed like the future was predetermined for us, I was unable to tell him what I had witnessed. Unaware that the prophecy was already tearing us apart, he had enough on his shoulders. "Valeria?" The silence was broken by Reinaldo's voice. His brow was furrowed in concern as he looked into my eyes. I said in a barely audible whisper, "I don't know what to do anymore. The prophecy is making us make decisions we can't." I didn't yank away when Reinaldo's hand reached for mine once more. We kissed quietly and frantically, a brief moment of intimacy during which we knew we would face whatever came next together. However, I knew in my heart that we were running out of time. The delicate moment between us was broken by the sudden sound of a loud crash that reverberated throughout the estate. As my heart skipped a beat, I jumped up and reached for Ronaldo's arm out of instinct. "What was that?" I asked with a hint of fear in my voice. He took a while to respond. Rather, he got to his feet, listening with a hardened expression. Wolf howls rang out in the distance, piercing and icy. The rogue wolves had come, completely controlled by the Underworld Council. Ronaldo said, "They're here," in a low, urgent voice. "We must relocate immediately." We hurried to the front lines after leaving the war room. Dark energy pervaded the air, and the ground shook underfoot as we got closer to the estate's edge. Then I saw it, stepping out of the darkness. It was a creature I had never seen before, its eyes gleaming with ill intent, its body contorted and unnatural. I could feel the weight of its power bearing down on us as it towered over everything in its immediate vicinity. "What is that?" Fear choking my words, I whispered. "I don't know," Ronaldo said, his voice tight, "but we will have to fight it." I sensed the dark magic encircling the creature as its eyes met ours. This was no typical foe. This was the latest weapon from the Underworld Council, and its purpose was to annihilate us. How could we possibly stop such a thing? Chapter 105. Ronaldo's POV. I stood at the Vargas estate's gates, staring down the approaching rogue wolves while the chilly night air pricked my skin. Knowing that this battle might be our last made my heart race in my chest. I could still picture Valeria's warnings, the prophecy, and the Underworld Council's looming shadow, along with the terror in her eyes. Although I knew that the real test of our relationship was still to come, her love had always been my strength. Everything we had worked so hard to create together came crashing down at this moment, this fight. Dark magic glowed in the eyes of the rogue wolves as they advanced, each twisted form displaying the power of the Underworld Council. Although their sheer numbers were intimidating, what really frightened me was the way they moved, moving with an odd unity that was governed by something much more sinister than simple force. Even though we were outnumbered and outmatched, I refused to give up. "We stand together, Vargas Pack!" I yelled, my voice rising above the howls and growls. In response, the wolves all around me growled, their fur twitching in readiness for battle. I could feel the force of the magic all around us as we charged into combat. I had never experienced anything like it. Like pawns in a game I couldn't comprehend, the rogue wolves weren't just more powerful, they were also better planned and more strategic. The dark magic that bound them to the Underworld Council seemed to feed their power, which seemed to increase with every moment. I became aware of the Council's actual power in the midst of the conflict. They were manipulating events in a way that was much more complex than I had anticipated. Every action we took was foreseen, and their magic thwarted every tactic. As the battle raged on, the air crackled with energy, and I felt myself being pushed back with each blow. "Remain firm." Even my voice didn't seem to have the same impact as it once did when I yelled at the pack. There were rogue wolves everywhere. Their numbers were increasing, and the conflict was evolving from one of survival to one of the soul of our planet. Even from a distance, I could sense Valeria and I becoming closer. I considered her, her anxieties, her determination, and I realized that she shared my resolve. However, I couldn't help but wonder if it was sufficient. Would our relationship be sufficient to subdue the Council's authority? The earth shook beneath us. The earth trembled deeply, and I noticed fissures forming in the ground that were creeping closer to where we were standing like a disease. The dark magic of the Underworld Council thickened the air, and I came to the sobering realization that this was not merely a battle, but a war for the very fabric of reality. I felt like I was being pushed to the limit as I continued to fight. I summoned all of my remaining strength, and my wolf form rushed forward, burning in a blaze of rage. The change was quick and instinctive, and for a brief instant the fight appeared to turn in our favor. The rogue wolves were unrelenting and seemed to be getting stronger by the moment, but my pack moved with renewed energy. A dark spell was then cast in the center of the battlefield. I could feel the air being drawn into the rift and dragging everything toward it as the ground beneath us split open. The weight of the magic caused the earth to groan, and it appeared as though the world's very fabric was rupturing, exposing a huge rift to the underworld. It was radiating a suffocating power, a malevolent force that threatened to devour everything in its path. Valeria. From a distance I could sense her energy drawing me back from the brink. The only thing preventing the rift from engulfing us all was our connection, our bond. Her strength and love served as the thread that held me firmly to this world and this reality. I knew without a doubt that we couldn't allow this rift to widen any further when I looked up and met her eyes across the battlefield. We had to stop it at all costs because the Underworld Council had unleashed this terror to destroy us all. However, a shadow appeared from the rift as I was about to take action. A tall, hideous figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes gleaming with an unearthly light. It was no common animal. I could sense the tremendous power it possessed as the air around it crackled with dark magic. For the first time in this battle, I felt completely helpless against the figure's oppressive, overwhelming presence. This was something much worse than a demon or another rogue wolf. It was a natural force, an underworld creature sent to obliterate all we had battled for. The creature took another step forward, its eyes fixed on me with such intensity that my heart stopped and the ground shook beneath us. It seemed to be able to sense the very core of who I am and see right into my soul. I stood tall, my wolf form bristling with energy, but even I knew that this was no ordinary foe. This was a being of unimaginable power, and I had no idea how we could defeat it. Valeria's voice came to me, desperate and urgent. Her voice cut through the commotion. "Reinaldo, we can't let it consume us. We have to fight back." I nodded, but deep down I knew that this would be the hardest thing we had ever faced. This moment was prearranged and orchestrated by the Underworld Council to destroy us and everything we held dear. We now had to confront it together. But as I braced myself to confront the creature, I couldn't help but wonder, was our relationship strong enough to withstand this evil force? Or would we all perish in the wrath of the underworld? The battle started when the creature's eyes met mine. Chapter 106, Valeria's Pove. Time seemed to stop as the battle raged all around me. The earth beneath my feet shook with each blow, and the air was heavy with the energy of dark magic, crackling like static. The prophecy's weight reminded me of the impossibly difficult decisions that still lay ahead, pressing down on me like a physical force. Knowing that whatever route I chose would rip something valuable from me made my heart hurt. I could hardly hear Reinaldo's words over the commotion when he called out to me. However, despite his presence and strength, the fear that was tearing at my chest persisted. The darkness of the Underworld Council had arrived. It was authentic, and now was the moment to confront it. In an attempt to find some calm in the middle of the storm, I closed my eyes. I kept thinking about the prophecy. Could my devotion to my family and my love for Reinaldo withstand what was about to happen? Or would I have to pick one over the other? I had no time to think about my fears. We had to fight because the world was collapsing around us. I felt the pull of something inside me, a latent power I had only begun to understand. Beneath the surface, it had always been there. However, I was forced to use it now, since the Underworld Council's sinister magic was encroaching on us. It was our only hope, though I wasn't entirely sure what it was. I concentrated on the strength of my relationship with Ronaldo and how it had always held us together. In order to strengthen our bond during this difficult time, I reached out to him. His presence filled me, and for a moment I felt a surge of power run through me. My force caused the rogue wolves surrounding us to stumble back, their dark energy wavering. It was successful. Then, however, the earth beneath us shattered. A huge figure emerged from the shadows, revealing the wide, yawning rift to the underworld. My heart stopped beating. The creature that surfaced wasn't your typical monster. It was something much worse, a force that seemed to distort the very air around it, a creature of unfathomable power. The world felt smaller just by its presence, suffocated by its very existence, and its eyes glowed with malice, burning with dark energy. The creature let loose a spell in a fit of rage that ripped through the ground and rocked the area beneath us. The sheer force of it knocked me off my feet, and for a moment I was helpless. However, I couldn't afford to remain in bed. I couldn't afford to be afraid. Not right now. Not when everything for which we had fought was at stake. I called upon everything I had left, the magic inside me, the bond with Ronaldo, everything I had learned in the moments we'd shared. I concentrated all of it into a single power wave and directed it at the creature. It appeared to falter and slow for a moment. Subsequently, its power doubled, and it surged forward once more. As I watched the rift widen and threaten to engulf everything, I screamed as the ground beneath us broke open. The darkness from the underworld and the magic that surrounded us were too much to handle, and I secretly knew that this was more than just a struggle for survival. This was a battle to prevent the total destruction of our world. Ronaldo's voice reached me, urgent and desperate. "Valeria, we must put an end to it immediately." I had no response. I could feel the power of the creature closing in, and I could see Ronaldo standing beside me, his own strength fading. His gaze met mine, and we exchanged a silent understanding. I knew it wouldn't be enough, though, even as we stood together. Not unless we managed to put a stop to this. The creature then made a move as I was ready to let loose everything I possessed. Faster than I could react, it sprang toward us and struck Ronaldo, knocking him to the ground before I could stop it. As I saw him crumble under the force of the creature's magic, his body lifeless and limp against the ground, my heart broke. He had been taken by the dark magic. I sensed it pulsing through him and drawing him down into the rift's depths. "No!" I ran to his side and screamed, my voice cracking. To get him to answer, I knelt next to him and shook him. However, his breathing was ragged and shallow, and his eyes were closed. With its eyes shining with malevolent triumph, the creature towered over us. "Ronaldo!" Panic rising in my chest, I whispered. "Wake up, please." I sensed the warmth of our relationship waning and the bond flickering. The one thing that had held us together through everything, our shared connection, was eroding. My eyes were burning from tears, but I fought the urge to cry. I resisted giving up. He needed to be saved by me. I had to keep us safe. As the shadow of the creature hung over us, I vowed to do something. I would fight, no matter what. I would find a way to keep our love intact, save Ronaldo, and prevent the Underworld Council from destroying everything. But I could feel the darkness encroaching on me with every second that went by. The creature was getting stronger, the rift was getting wider, and Ronaldo, if I didn't do something, he wouldn't make it. I had to take action. However, what? I was certain that the fight for our planet was far from over, as the creature's laughter reverberated in my ears, and loyalty's real cost had not yet been incurred. How would I respond? Would I be able to save him before it was too late? Would the darkness engulf us all? Or would I be able to permanently stop the Underworld Council? Chapter 107, Ronaldo's POV. As I lay on the ground, my body hurting from the vicious attack, my vision became blurry. The dark magic that surrounded us was still very strong and nearly suffocating. I had been knocked down by the underworld creature's strike, and the power it possessed was pervasive in the air. I could hear Valeria's cries for me, but the harder I tried to concentrate, the more I felt like I was slipping away. With every second that went by, I could sense our connection, our love, eroding. It seemed as though everything was being consumed by the darkness. So much had already been stolen by the creature's magic, and now it was targeting me. Valeria. I muttered her name, but my voice could hardly be heard over the commotion. I pushed against the ground, struggling to raise myself, my body quivering from the pain. The creature laughed, making fun of me and all that we had battled for. I was unable to give up. I couldn't allow it to take us or her, not in this manner. I ignored the burning feeling in my chest and forced myself to stand. The battle and my pack seemed so far away now. The bond I had with Valeria and the struggle to keep it intact were the only things that mattered. Even though it was subtle, I could sense her presence. Even though everything else was threatening to break us apart, it was the tether that kept me grounded. Even though there were still rogue wolves attacking, I couldn't take my eyes off the dark figure from the underworld because of its overwhelming presence. Its ancient and twisted magic was leaking into the air around us, and I could feel it. I was losing strength. I had to struggle. I had to keep her safe. I snarled, drawing on my greatest strength. Doubt and fear were pushed aside as my alpha blood rushed forward. In one explosive surge, I called forth all my strength and let it loose. With a blinding flash, the battlefield was illuminated by the energy that blasted from me. The ground beneath us cracked, and the creature staggered back, momentarily dazed. For a brief moment, I believed we had a chance. However, the grotesque chuckle of the creature reverberated through the atmosphere. It wasn't over, I knew. The creature struck back before I could respond. My body was engulfed in flames as a blast of dark magic struck me with full force. My skin was seared as the magic tore through me. I let out a painful scream, but nothing helped. The Underworld Council had too much power. I sensed that I was losing control and slipping. "Valeria," I sobbed, but the pain smothered my words. My vision became blurry, and I briefly believed I wouldn't be able to continue fighting. The magic was too strong, too all-consuming. Then I heard her voice. "Reinaldo," she muttered to me. Her love, her strength, so familiar, so warm, pulsed through our bond. Her presence gave me a new lease on life, and I mustered the courage to resist. The creature's power continued to increase, but I held on to that connection and allowed it to fuel me. I knew we were running out of time because I could feel the darkness encroaching. I forced myself to endure the pain by gritting my teeth. Until it destroyed everything, the creature would not stop. And I couldn't allow that to occur. Not without a struggle. I looked at Valeria. I had to keep her safe. Because of our connection, I could sense the magic growing inside of me once more. But this time, the creature wasn't retreating. It moved forward, its eyes blazing with ill intent, its presence oppressive. I could feel everything pressing down on me as the ground trembled once more. With another surge of power, the creature came straight at me. Even though my body shook, I refused to let it prevail. Not just yet. However, I was powerless to stop the magic blast as it struck me once more. I was flung back, my body hitting the floor with such force that I was out of breath. The last thing I saw before the darkness encroached was Valeria's face, her eyes brimming with despair and terror. "Reinaldo!" I could still hear her voice. Then everything went dark. I could feel the darkness engulfing me as the world whirled around me. However, something was drawing me back, away from the precipice. The power was too great for me to reach out. Valeria's voice was back in my ears, getting progressively softer. "Please, Reinaldo." I was unable to understand her words, even though they were like a lifeline. I wanted to fight. I wanted to defend her by standing. However, my body refused to comply. It was too dark. My limbs were numb, and my body felt heavy. It was all falling apart. Then a spark appeared. My senses were suddenly filled with warmth, and then I felt like I was being pulled back. My body struggled against the darkness that had taken it, and I gasped for breath. My relationship with Valeria sprang to life, saving me from the depths of despair. The creature, however, remained. I could sense its presence and hear it. It would not stop. Not right now. I had to get this done. I needed to figure out how to stop it. However, when I looked up, Valeria was standing next to me, her eyes brimming with resolve. I realized then that I wasn't alone. Together, we were in this. And I realized we had one last chance as the creature towered over us. Would it suffice? Could we make it through this? Could we prevent ourselves from being torn apart by the wrath of the Underworld Council? The creature's eyes shone brightly, and I realized that our battle was far from over, but we were going to fight together this time. And there was nothing that could stop us. Chapter 108. Valeria's Pove. Time seemed to have stopped, but the battle raged on all around me. The air crackled with the raw power of dark magic, and the ground shook violently beneath my feet. The prophecy hovering over us, the betrayal, the fear of what lay ahead, all of it was weighing heavily on me. Even Reinaldo's love and strength couldn't dispel the fear that seized me, even though his voice echoed in my ears and my heart ached. I knew that if we didn't confront the darkness of the underworld together, we would lose everything. I focused on Reinaldo as he struggled with the magic of the dark creature. It hurt me to see him so exposed, and his form seemed to deteriorate with every second that went by. I sensed that our relationship, which had been our strength, was starting to wane. The magic of the Underworld Council was too much to bear. We felt as though we were engaged in a conflict for our souls as well as our lives. I couldn't let him go. Not in this manner. What could I do, though? The creature's power was overwhelming. It was so much darker than anything we'd faced before. The magic was trying to tear me apart, and I could feel it pulling at my soul. But I wouldn't let it. I wouldn't allow it. Something ancient was stirring inside of me. I didn't know how to control it, but I could feel it. My bloodline, a force I had only just started to comprehend, was connected to the magic. It was all I had now. I cried out to it, groping for strength deep within. It responded. The power surged through me, and my heart thundered. The ground cracked beneath my feet, and the air around us grew thick with energy. Sensing the change, the renegade wolves hesitated, their eyes wide with terror. However, it was insufficient, not yet. The underworld creature was unfazed. Its eyes were blazing with hatred as it towered over us in its dark form. I then understood that the struggle was about more than just surviving. It was about preventing everything, including us, from being consumed by the darkness. I concentrated on Reinaldo, using the connection that had held us together. A fresh surge of power accompanied the connection between us as it flared to life. I used every last bit of strength I had to push it outward. The magic encircled me like a shield, a force of protection that permeated the atmosphere. Despite the rogue wolf's hesitation, the creature remained upright, its malevolence unabated. Then I sensed it. The draw. A rift appeared in front of me, a vast empty space filled with ominous energy that beckoned and swirled. Attracted to it, I took a step forward, but I refrained from letting it control me. I had to struggle. However, my fear was intensifying along with the rift in the darkness. I was taunted by my distorted reflection in the shadows. It was everything I was afraid of, the destruction it could cause, and the power I could use, the part of me that might lose control and become the very thing I was fighting. The reflection muttered, "You can't fight this. You'll end up like them." I shut out the voice by closing my eyes. I would not allow the darkness to prevail. I wouldn't allow it to rule me. Not right now. With every step I took, my heart pounded faster. Reinaldo, he needed to be saved by me. I had to keep us safe. I let out everything in a primal scream. The energy crackled with intensity as the full force of my power swept through the air. The rift started to tremble as the ground shook violently. Everything paused for a second. Not a word. Then, with a deafening roar, the underworld creature staggered back, its magic faltering for the first time. However, it was insufficient. It wasn't done, and the darkness persisted. Even though I had ripped the fabric of its magic, it was still not completely destroyed. The creature was only momentarily weakened. The ground shook once more violently. The creature's dark magic swirled around it like a storm as it roared in rage. How long had it stood there? Could I complete the task at hand and halt the creature before it annihilated us all? I felt a sudden chill go through the air. My heart thumping in my chest, I turned. Then I noticed it. The creature was backing away, but a darker aspect was taking shape. Colder than the night itself, a figure emerged from the shadows. Towering, shrouded in darkness, its eyes blazing with evil strength. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. I realized then that this was more than just the creature. This was worse. As I prepared for the fight, my heart was pounding. Around me, the air grew denser, suffocating. I sensed that the magic of the underworld was drawing me in more and more. Valeria. Though his words were strained, Ronaldo's voice cut through the fog. He was wounded. Although it wavered, our relationship remained strong and unflinching. I was unable to let him go. I couldn't let him go. With overwhelming dark power, the creature's new form advanced. With swirling clouds and a sense of impending doom, the sky above us appeared to grow even darker. With my heart pounding in my chest, I turned to face Ronaldo. Time was running out. "Stay with me," I said in a tremulous whisper. However, the rift widened, and the new creature's power surged forward as soon as I finished speaking. What was it? Who was it? Could we halt it before it devoured everything? I was having trouble breathing. I was unable to reach the answer even though it was right in front of me. Could we win this fight? Would the darkness be repelled by our love and strength alone? Or was this the start of the end? Chapter 109. Emiliano's Pove. I ran, the commotion all around me nearly drowning out the sound of my boots hitting the ground. Controlled by the Underworld Council, the rogue wolves were unrelenting and tore through the Montoya estate like a dark tide. Anger and betrayal were fueling my body, and my heart was racing in my chest. Now, however, none of that mattered. The stakes were higher than ever in the war we were in. I could feel the dark magic pulsing in the air, thick and oppressive, and the ground trembled beneath me. I had recently discovered the extent of the evil in my own family, my father's agreement with the Underworld Council. The weight of the secret, which had been kept from me for years, was bearing down on me. I had to keep my family safe. I had to keep Valeria safe. I witnessed my pack fighting valiantly as I made my way through the battlefield's chaos. As they struggled to defend their home, wolves were shifting, their claws and fangs exposed. I knew it wouldn't be enough, so I joined the battle, slicing through the air with my blade. Their dark magic was overwhelming, and the rogue wolves were too strong. Then I saw him, an old ally, someone I had once trusted, as I swung my blade at one of the rogue wolves. His betrayal was more profound than anything else because he had allied himself with Malik Blackthorn. For a brief moment, I could see the guilt and shame in his eyes as they met mine. However, it was too late to apologize. He had made his decision. Why? With an angry, hoarse voice, I demanded. Why would you betray us? The traitor took a while to respond. Before he spoke, his gaze strayed to the chaos surrounding us. We were offered power by the Underworld Council, a place where only the strong survive and chaos rules their new world. Emiliano, I had no other option. The words struck me like a blow to the body. Strength. The promise made by the Underworld Council was untrue. It was all about dominance and control, and he had been duped. You betrayed us in order to gain power? I snarled as my anger mounted. Power is not at issue here. The goal is to survive. You will only serve as a pawn in their scheme. Anger twisted his face. You're not getting it. They assured us of all our desires. Emiliano, this is the future. The supernatural world's future. Disgusted, I shook my head. Not in this manner. Not by compromising our principles. You don't remember who we are. I roared forward, fighting the traitor viciously. We battled with everything we had as my blade and his clashed, sending sparks flying. The anger made me blind to everything but the necessity of stopping him, and the weight of betrayal made me push harder. Our bodies moved instinctively as we fought like animals. It was too late, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes now. The damage was already done. I hit him with one quick motion and saw his body fall to the ground. My heart was pounding and my chest was heaving as I stood over him, but I was unable to feel content. No triumph would be sufficient to repair the world that was collapsing around me. As I looked up, I saw that the world was becoming more divided and that the sky had grown darker. The Underworld Council was no longer merely observing. They were getting ready to attack. Knowing that this was only the beginning made my heart sink. Out of the rift came a new, more dreadful force. I saw them, shadow wolves, emerging from the rift like an unstoppable tide as the ground shook once more. I was chilled by their twisted forms and glowing eyes. This was more than just an assault. Something worse was about to happen. Emiliano! Behind me, I heard someone shout. Valeria was standing there when I turned around, her eyes fierce but her face pale with fear. She was prepared to fight. Was it sufficient, though? I was aware that we couldn't defeat this force by ourselves. This was the moment the council had been waiting for. Standing together was our only option, but even that seemed like a losing battle. With the weight of everything we had lost pressing down on me, I turned to Valeria. This cannot be stopped by us alone. With resolve in her eyes, she nodded. Then we battled together. However, the darkness was encroaching even as she said those words. The rift was widening by the moment, and the shadow wolves were moving forward. We were out of time. We were in the center of the storm, and the struggle for survival had already started. Now, what would we do? Had we already lost the battle, or could we prevent the darkness from devouring us? The cost of loyalty had never been more obvious as the war was just getting started. Chapter 110. Valeria's POV. I could practically hear my heart pounding in my chest over the commotion all around me. I was perched on the brink of everything. I was disintegrating along with the world. Even though Reinaldo was at my side, the storm was getting stronger. It was up to me to determine whether we could survive this situation, or whether everything I held dear would be destroyed as the magic of the underworld drew closer. I sensed the rift's pull, the sinister force that was gradually shredding everything. Whispering promises of strength and an end to the suffering, it was alluring. I knew it wasn't real, though. The council desired to rule us all and consume everything. My love for Reinaldo, my family, and everything I fought for was the only thing that could stop it. However, it might also ruin us. Reinaldo and I were retaliating. Together, we repelled the ominous creatures that continued to approach. Like an unstoppable storm, the darkness seemed to get thicker and heavier with each blow. It was trying to force me to give in, and I could feel it inside of me. "We must mend the rift," I said in a strained whisper to Reinaldo. "That's the only option." He nodded, but fear was visible in his eyes. "I'm afraid. Be afraid for us." However, he stood with me despite his fear. Even as the darkness threatened to engulf us, I saw the resolve light up his eyes. I sensed the underworld's power more strongly than before as the ground beneath us split open. The gap was growing. I could sense the hunger and desperation of the dark creatures as they flooded through, trying to eat everything. I knew what I needed to do: give myself up. Ever since the prophecy was first made public, I had been getting ready for this moment. It was more difficult than I had anticipated because it felt real and overwhelming now. I nearly fell apart at the idea of leaving Reinaldo and breaking the connection that had gotten us through everything. But the stakes were high, our planet, and I'd stop at nothing to keep it safe. I closed my eyes, summoning the power pulsating through my veins and the magic within me. I was drawn forward and in the direction of the rift by the surge of energy. I sensed Reinaldo's strength, love, and presence at my side. It provided me with the bravery I required to make this decision. I inhaled deeply as I prepared to use all of my strength to seal the rift. Then I heard him. "Valeria." Reinaldo's voice, clear and full of love, lifted my mental gloom. "This is not required of you." I was startled by what he said. My heart was already breaking when I turned to face him. "There is nothing we can do. Reinaldo, we cannot allow them to prevail. I must complete this task." "No," he said, his eyes burning with resolve. "We'll work together to overcome this. I won't let you go." His words were nearly too much for me to handle, so I swallowed. I felt the connection between us, the love that had always held us together, as my fingers touched his as I reached for him. However, I couldn't allow the darkness to take us, because it was getting closer. I whispered, "I love you." He returned the whisper, "I love you too." But it's not over yet. I sensed the last of the rift's magic as it widened more quickly. I had to do something. But was it really possible for me to abandon everything? Could I really give my life for the world I cared about? I could feel the heat of the rift spreading across my skin. I felt the tremendous power at my fingertips as I extended my hand. However, I paused. Reinaldo pleaded, his voice raw with emotion. "Valeria, please. Avoid doing this. You don't need to give up anything. We'll figure something else out." The magic of the rift was intensifying, the darkness threatening to engulf everything. I wanted to think that Reinaldo was real. I wanted to cling to him, to keep us together. However, I was aware of the reality. I had to save all of us. and the darkness drew closer as I stood there, prepared to make the ultimate decision. We were almost at the rift. Did my affection for Reinaldo prevent it? Would the darkness separate us, or could we truly face it together? I prepared myself by closing my eyes. However, the darkness had not yet finished with us.